Hey all, my name is Aaron Carey and welcome to the February 2023 update for Breach and Attack Simulation. So what is Breach and Attack Simulation, you might ask? Breach and Attack Simulation is a security testing methodology for validating application and endpoint security controls. So that extends past just what a web spider or a dynamic analysis or DAST tool would do, and it actually goes ahead and performs exploitation of vulnerabilities so that we can prove out what an attacker behavior could look like on your network and what the implications of that might be. It differs from penetration testing, which is typically manual validation of external penetration and then going ahead and finding what an attacker may do on your network. And this is because BAS is primarily automated. And so BAS is a good fit for being a part of your DevSecOps pipeline, as you're able to add in breach and attack simulation checks into dynamic analysis tools or other automation inside your pipeline to add a more extensive reporting around vulnerabilities so that you can validate which ones are you're actually vulnerable to, or which one you may have actually mitigated in some fashion that detections may not have noticed. So the vision. So as I mentioned, the vision for BAS is around the DevSecOps lifecycle. What we want to do is allow organizations to automatically simulate those attacker behaviors as part of their testing process. So the progress for February, what's been shipped so far is I've gone ahead and worked with the dynamic analysis team to add support in for HTTP authentication for DAST. Previously, there was an open issue around documenting that usage for users, and just as part of my testing on breach and attack simulation and adding in additional checks for callback attacks, I realized that I needed to have support myself for HTTP authentication. So that adds basic digest off and exposes what the dynamic analysis team already did inside of Browserker and just expose that to the DAST engine when you're running GitLab today. I'm now a maintainer on Browserker, the internal component for browser-based scanning, as well as a DAST maintainer for the open source DAST tool, which runs our different engines and is the analyzer that runs the different scanners that we support for DAST scans. Off of that, the progress for what's been in review, one of my focuses has been around callback servers. Callback servers allow you to test for out-of-band interactions, so interactions that shouldn't take place, that you may have a tool in your network, in your typical network, where you'd want to say, hey, that triggers a firewall rule or something because it's exfiltrating data in some way, whether it's a firewall rule or an alert from a SIM tool. That type of interaction is something that we want to test for, and to do that, I've gone ahead and added generic support for a callback server. So an HTTP callback server, very simple. I allow running that as a HTTP on an HTTP port and listening inside of your job as a service container. And so your GitLab CI job, the DAST job, has the ability to now, if you enable this a callback service feature flag, which is in a merge request right now being reviewed. If you enable that feature flag, we actually will perform a callback attack in the case of different CWEs like CWE94, which is around code injection. So if I can do code injection and prove that out, I will, instead of actually just doing a hello world type request with a unique string to prove that we injected arbitrary code, I'll actually make a request to a callback server. So I'm supporting that generic callback service that I've created as a service container, or in the case of an on-demand DAST scan, or a DAST scan that you don't want to talk out to the internet instead of just talking internally to another container in your runner. I have the ability to configure interact SH, and so I've been adding that ability for interact SH. I'm still doing some work around the credential management of that and sort of enforcement of whether we and planning around whether we want to allow the public OAuth domains, or whether we want to enforce running your own interact SH server. Running your own interact SH server solves some security implications. So I think the default that I'm going to be leaning towards right now is having the ability to configure your own personal server, where you have to use credentialed access and enforce encryption for your connections. I'll be documenting all of that in a public issue with all those findings once I've made those sort of internal changes to the Browserker scanner. For out-of-bound interaction, one of the things I've done in my previous showcase, I went over using nuclei, and where I was able to use the nuclei interact sh interaction and then append those details into the vulnerability reports using the generic report schema. Well, I've now moved that natively into our own Dast engine, where I'm actually appending that interaction details, whether it comes from interact sh or whether it comes from another callback server. So I've made a generic report. On top of the generic report, what I've done is I've added in details about different interaction types. And it doesn't matter which engine you use for your callback server. It'll across those, we'll get consistent reports with details about the type of interaction that's made place and what the sort of implications of that are. So usage. I've been following the dynamic analysis pipelines and sort of internal metrics around different usage there for folks that decide to share that with us. And my sort of planning around that is I want to draft a blog post for announcing the callback attack support. I'll be detailing how you can enable that in whenever that goes into early preview. And once that's done, I'll be adding in additional metrics, which I want to get out from the start. So I have additional metrics that we start collecting where we can see that there's not many users using the callback server attack feature flag. And then we can see the growth, and I can provide metrics around the growth of the unique number of projects that we're seeing with the callback attack feature flag enabled for their Dast jobs. And so that's going to be totally anonymous, but it'll just give us a really quick metric around, hey, this is the number of projects that are using this. And that's going to give some good visibility into the sort of a pickup of who decides to enable those callback attacks whenever we first roll the feature. On top of that, I've been connecting with a few customer-facing team members who've been interested in penetration testing and different types of offensive security related offerings that GitLab might be providing or plan to provide in the future. So I've been able to speak through the showcase and show them previous showcase videos, and I'll be continuing to do that where I'm able to collaborate with them and then reach out to customers who want to talk more about the feature set and see if it solves their use cases. Because a lot of the time when folks ask for penetration testing, some of those things can actually be covered automatically or in an automated fashion through breach and attack simulation. Opportunities that I've identified off the back of that is additional coverage for CWEs. We already have support for a few CWEs and different types of checks for different softwares we might scan. And what I would like to do is I'd like to work with the dynamic analysis team to add in additional CWE supports for those callback attacks when it makes sense. For things like XXE and other serialized little types, which can call out to external resources. That's something I really want to see because right now it's heavily around code injection, but there's other types of vulnerabilities where I can force a website to reach out to my callback server to prove out. There's also integration with custom scanners. I had some really good conversations with the Nuclei team and the project discovery team who build Nuclei around potential integrations there, and I've planned some upstream changes around the Nuclei analyzer tool that I built and merging a lot of that functionality for generating a GitLab security reports back into the open source Nuclei tool and giving back to the community there. As well as that is there's integration with third-party callback servers. Interact SH is one that I've demoed in the past, and adding in the integration from there from the GitLab side is something I feel very comfortable with, and I would love to be able to do that in a way where people are already able to use the tools that they're most familiar with inside their pipelines. So what is my next focus? I'm going to be focusing next up around adding incubating feature banners and different calls to action within the product for folks that are using dynamic analysis or on-demand scanning, as well as if you have a vulnerability report, just enabling a user to see, hey, you got a vulnerability report, why don't you click this button to simulate an attack? So adding that in as an ability where you're able to either take a service container or a test endpoint, which we can prove that you have ownership of, and being able to simulate an attack against that based on different vulnerability findings we had from your pipeline for different CVEs or CWEs that we detected based on whether it was found in dependency scanning potentially, or whether it was found as part of your DAST scan in the case of just the common web enumerations that we can have generic attacks against. I'll be documenting callback attack usage. It's something I've started internally. I've started doing merge requests around those docs. So what I'd like to get though is, as well as that blog post introducing the feature, I'd like to have good user documentation up front for folks who want to enable that incubating feature. As well as that is just supporting the on-demand simulation of a DAS finding. So in an on-demand DAS scan, you can already input a target to scan. And I'd like to add the ability for that on-demand type scan for you to be able to say, hey, I want to run breach and attack simulation as well. And then for that on-demand scan, we're able to do pre-flight checks to say, hey, can I actually attempt these different types of attacks against that server? And just the appendix as always. My handbook page is linked. Sort of the issues. I'll be dropping those links inside of the YouTube video. It was great talking to y'all again, and I hope to give y'all an update soon. Thank you.